A new FBI report released just hours ago showing that the South is seeing the highest number of reported human trafficking cases compared to other parts of the country.
And federal authorities say human trafficking networks are increasingly using airports and international cargo routes to move victims across borders.
These human traffickers are moving these children. Sometimes they don't turn themselves in. Sometimes it's not just unaccompanied minors walking up to Border Patrol, but adults smuggling children into the United States for the worst, most nefarious purposes.
100,000 victims did not disappear by accident. They were transported directly through the international cargo system with the help of corrupt officials. Containers moved, victims inside. And for months, no one inside the system asked questions. But what they discovered behind that door did not just end a 14-month investigation. It rewrote everything investigators thought they knew about who had been protecting the Sinaloa cartel in Texas.
Human trafficking is not just a distant overseas problem. The issue is here. It's in our communities. It's in our small towns. It's in our big cities.
At 2:48 a.m., operations at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, Texas, were moving to the quiet rhythm of the night shift. Inside Terminal 7, cargo containers were being brought in for inspection before the surge of international freight traffic expected later that morning. On paper, the shipment scheduled for clearance looked completely ordinary. The cargo manifest listed pediatric medical equipment, marked as urgent humanitarian aid. 12 crates had already been approved for priority clearance, meaning they could pass through federal inspection without undergoing a second detailed search. The authorization signature belonged to David Larson, a senior aviation security coordinator who had worked in the cargo security division for nearly 7 years. His electronic approval allowed the 12 packages to be released just before 3 a.m. But something about this shipment made a veteran cargo inspector pause. The container's refrigeration system was running nearly 15 degrees below the regulated transport temperature. At first, it appeared to be nothing more than a mechanical malfunction. But when the inspector placed his hand against the steel wall of the container, he felt something different, a faint vibration. He leaned closer, pressing his ear against the metal door. There was movement inside. "Initiate a secondary inspection immediately," ordered Special Agent Marcus Reed, the federal supervisor in charge of overnight cargo inspections. Within minutes, the container was moved under high-intensity inspection lights. Federal personnel cut the security seal and slowly pulled the doors open. What they saw inside immediately changed the direction of the investigation. Inside, they discovered 6 dehydrated and terrified children, hiding behind cargo crates arranged to form a hidden compartment. And inside 3 black-sealed packages disguised as surgical supplies, investigators found 340 kilograms of pure cocaine, vacuum-packed inside medical packaging. On the table beside the container sat Larson's personal authorization stamp, the same stamp that had been used 97 times over the previous 11 months. That confirmed what investigators were about to realize. Every shipment connected to the suspected smuggling corridor had passed through the terminal under his electronic signature. That moment closed a 14-month investigation, and it also exposed how the entire network had begun. If you believe corruption like this must be brought into the light, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and comment "exposed" below.
Now, the FBI says during the last 10 years, more than 10,000 victims of human trafficking were reported to the Bureau.
At 3:14 a.m., investigators from the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security began reviewing the shipping records connected to the container that had just been discovered. Inside the Southwest Intelligence Division, analysts believed they were chasing what one senior officer would later describe as a ghost. A smuggling corridor built so carefully that it left almost no trace inside normal cargo transportation systems. Investigators followed the trail of shipments and discovered that they all led back to 4 small logistics companies operating in Central America and the Caribbean. All 4 businesses had been registered within the same 18-month period. These companies had moved more than $200 million through offshore accounts, routing funds through shell corporations in Belize, Panama, and Cyprus, before the money returned to the United States disguised as consulting payments and freight contracts. But the financial trail was not the most troubling discovery. Surveillance footage collected by the federal task force showed David Larson briefly speaking with a logistics contractor, a man whose company name appeared on 14 suspicious shipments. By the end of the review, investigators realized something deeply disturbing. Larson was not simply approving paperwork. It appeared that he was controlling the gateway itself, but several questions still remained unanswered. Who had provided Larson with the access codes? Why had 6 federal inspections been quietly redirected away from Terminal 7 over the past year? What had been hidden inside the encrypted hard drive for months? And why did one of the satellite phone numbers linked to the network belong to a retired military attaché who still held an active federal security clearance? 4 questions, and what agents discovered in the first 10 minutes of the raid would change everything. Stay with us, because the real architect of this smuggling corridor was still hiding in the shadows. At 4:11 a.m., inside a temporary command center outside Dallas, a digital operations map displayed the final targets. 6 locations stretching across the North Texas corridor. Not just the airport, not just one terminal. 6 locations were activated within the same operational window. The cargo area of Terminal 7, a private aircraft hangar on the southern edge of the airport, a logistics warehouse in Grand Prairie, a commercial cold storage facility in Fort Worth, a cargo warehouse in Irving, and a document processing office in downtown Dallas that, on paper, was registered as a freight consulting company. Within 90 seconds, federal task forces launched coordinated raids across the region. More than 1,200 federal agents were deployed. 60 SWAT teams, 18 Black Hawk helicopters, and tactical units from multiple federal agencies swept through transportation corridors along Interstate 35. What agents discovered in the first hour stunned even veteran investigators. At the warehouse outside Grand Prairie, federal officers forced open a shipping container and discovered 17 children being held inside a hidden compartment behind stacked cargo crates. Some were as young as 9 years old. None of them had valid travel documents. Emergency medical teams were called immediately. At the Fort Worth cold storage facility, agents seized 12 forged passports, 34 counterfeit identification cards, and more than $8.6 million in cash hidden inside commercial refrigeration units. Several members of the Sinaloa cartel attempted to fire at federal officers before retreating behind reinforced warehouse doors and deploying smoke grenades to obstruct the agents' view. The suburban house connected to the logistics contractor revealed an equally disturbing cache: 32 semi-automatic rifles, 4 tons of methamphetamine concealed inside frozen fish containers, 680,000 fentanyl pills pressed to resemble prescription oxycodone, ballistic body armor, and encrypted satellite phones used to coordinate cross-border operations. By the end of the first 40 minutes, the Federal Command Center confirmed that 27 human trafficking victims had already been located across the raid sites. Several others were believed to have been scheduled for transport within hours. But the most critical discovery came from the consulting office in downtown Dallas. Inside a locked room, agents found a military-grade encrypted server rack, still running and connected to an external data line. One file measured 6.4 gigabytes. Agents could not open it on site. It was immediately transferred to the FBI Cyber Division in Quantico, Virginia, on the earliest available flight. What was inside that drive? That was the moment the investigation stopped being just a drug trafficking case and became something far bigger. If you think this is already big, what investigators uncovered next will shock you even more. Stay with us. 6 hours after the raids began, inside the FBI Cyber Command at Quantico, Virginia, 2 analysts from the Bureau's Infrastructure Crime Division broke through the first layer of encryption. At 11:52 a.m., what appeared on their screens was not simply the ledger of a drug and human trafficking ring. It was an architecture, a living map. Shell companies, 29 of them, operating under different names in freight transport, agricultural imports, and humanitarian logistics. Payments moved through offshore accounts in Belize, Panama, and Cyprus before returning to the United States disguised as consulting contracts and freight service fees. In total, analysts documented more than $200 million flowing through the network over a 3-year period. Internally, investigators gave the system a name: the Transit Map. The money moved with brutal precision. The Sinaloa cartel routed narcotics through shipments originating from legitimate Mexican trade partners. Those shipments entered DFW Airport using pre-authorized clearance codes that could only be generated by senior federal aviation security officials. Inside the files were detailed shipment logs spanning nearly 5 years. Cargo cleared without secondary inspection. Every entry recorded container numbers, shipping routes, and encoded passenger totals. When analysts compared those records with airport cargo manifests, the numbers matched with disturbing accuracy. According to the data, at least 312 people had been moved through this corridor, many of them minors. The 6 children discovered in the container at Terminal 7 were only the most recent victims. One analyst, Maria Torres, a 12-year veteran of the Bureau, later told her supervisor she had to step away from the screen for 5 minutes, not because of the workload, but because of how carefully the system had been designed. "I've seen dirty money," she reportedly said. "I've never seen dirty architecture." Then investigators found the payment ledger. Badge numbers, no names, only numbers. Next to each number were monthly deposits disguised as aviation security consulting fees, traffic analysis contracts, and logistics advisory payments. 14 airport employees appeared in the records, and one entry brought the entire room to silence. One badge number traced directly back to David Larson, $24,000 per month. For 11 months, a total of $264,000. Each payment arrived the week after a major Sinaloa shipment cleared through Terminal 7 without inspection. But Larson was not acting alone. The records referenced a secondary chain of authorization, someone with federal authority above airport management level, a person identified only by a code name, Cardinal. Pause for a moment. Guess who Cardinal is, because the answer will be revealed in the next 60 seconds. At 5:27 a.m., inside the Joint Task Force Command Decoding Center in Quantico, investigators began focusing on a single word that kept appearing across multiple encrypted files: the Protector. At first, investigators believed the name referred to a cartel coordinator, or perhaps a logistics executive operating outside the United States. But when analysts traced the electronic signatures attached to the authorization files, something unexpected appeared. One name surfaced again, and again, and again: Brigadier General Howard Voss. The highest level system access had been issued from inside the Federal Aviation Security Network itself. Voss was not an airport employee. He was a retired U.S. Army general, a man who had spent nearly 3 decades working on border security and transportation defense programs. After leaving the military, he had been appointed as a federal security liaison, overseeing cargo screening modernization projects at several major airports across Texas. 3 years earlier, Voss had played a central role in designing the automated pre-clearance cargo inspection system now used at Texas International Airport, the same system David Larson had used to approve the suspicious shipments. According to internal policy documents, Voss had argued that the new clearance program would accelerate humanitarian shipments and reduce congestion along international cargo corridors. But investigators would soon discover that the system had another purpose. The list of individuals connected to the network was staggering: 23 police officers from 4 cities across Texas, 7 Border Patrol agents, 4 sitting judges, 11 state legislators. Every name, every payment, every recorded phone call, all of it had been documented not by investigators, but by Voss himself. Insurance, a dead man switch preloaded and encrypted, programmed to automatically release the entire archive to 14 media organizations if Voss lost access to the server for more than 72 hours. It was a parallel system, a second power structure operating in the shadows, one that served the cartel, not the Constitution. General Voss was arrested at his private residence in San Antonio at 6:44 a.m. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The records spoke for themselves. The network extended far beyond Texas. Transportation routes operating under fraudulent agricultural permits had moved shipments north through Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri. David Larson was ultimately charged with 34 federal counts. General Voss faced espionage and extortion charges. When the federal sweeps were completed, authorities had arrested 67 individuals connected to the human trafficking network, including airport personnel, logistics contractors, document forgers, and transportation coordinators operating across multiple cities. Federal agents also seized more than $24 million in cash and assets, including properties purchased through shell companies linked to offshore financial accounts identified during the investigation. Which meant the network investigators had just dismantled was never just about smuggling. It was about tearing down a corrupt system that had been operating inside America itself. When the final arrests were made and the evidence was sealed inside federal court files, investigators realized the case had uncovered something far larger than a single trafficking operation. It had exposed a system. For years, this network moved quietly through the same international cargo routes that carry millions of tons of legitimate freight into the United States every year. Containers arrived, paperwork cleared, trucks left the airport before sunrise, and hidden inside that machinery, victims were transported across borders while the people responsible held official badges and positions of authority. Federal investigators confirmed that at least 312 victims had been moved through the corridor known internally as the transit map. More than $200 million flowed through offshore accounts connected to the network, and when the operation was finally dismantled, 67 individuals had been arrested, including airport officials, logistics contractors, and corrupt insiders who helped keep the system running. But the damage cannot be measured only in numbers. Across Texas and neighboring states, families are still searching for children who disappeared into trafficking pipelines that stretched across 8 states and multiple international routes. The raids shut down one corridor. The arrests dismantled one network. But the investigation also revealed something investigators now warn about openly. Corruption does not always appear in the form of violence. Sometimes it hides behind paperwork, clearance codes, and people inside the system who choose to look the other way. And that leaves one question investigators continue to ask today. If a network this large could operate inside one of the busiest cargo airports in America for years, how many others are still waiting to be discovered?